Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee. My name's... Are we all right, Louise? Yep, my name's Councillor Keithley. I'll be your chair tonight. Still getting some feedback in my left ear. Are we okay? No, sorry. Oh. There we go. Is that good? Okay, we'll start with some housekeeping. Members, please ensure that the microphone is switched on when you're speaking, and please don't move it about. We've had some feedback about voices not being able to be picked up, so if you could keep it in front of you, that's great, and switch off when you finish speaking. There are no fire alarms scheduled tonight, so if the fire alarm does go off, we do have to leave, and we make our way out of the building. Nearest fire exit is in that bottom left-hand corner for those in the public as well. And the muster point is the car park beside the Windmill pub. Please note this meeting is also being broadcast live, and that means members of the public not here today are able to view the proceedings. So tonight with me on my right, Olivia Quinn, Democratic Services Officer, Amy Shipley, our legal officer. On my left, Richard Gardner, our planning manager, and case officers tonight, Louise Coleman and Sian Mayer. Richard, I believe you've got a statement to make to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. There we go. Apologies. My role tonight is to provide impartial advice and to assist members in their decision taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. We'll organise some training for you afterwards on the IT. We've got some public speakers tonight, so I'll call you up to the table in front of you there. So if you'd like to come up when you're ready, I'll call you up. You press the button on the right-hand side, and you've all got an allotted time. I'll confirm that to you when you come up. And if you want, I'll give you a 30-second warning while you're speaking so that we keep you to time. And once you've finished speaking, the committee members might wish to ask you questions. So if you could just stay where you are, and once we get to the end of those questions, you'll be free to leave the table. So thank you very much for that. So having done that, we can move on to the agenda. Olivia, please. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Hencher-Seraphin, Councillor Holmes and Councillor Scorer, who Councillor Littlewood is substituting for.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Okay, item 2 is disclosure of interests. So do any members have any disclosures to make us aware of? Looking around the table. Oh, there is one. Councillor Adam.
Sorry, concentrating on what I was doing. Yes, sorry, my wife is the parish clerk for Knapton Parish Council, but we haven't discussed the application, and that pertains to the first application this evening, but I come with an open mind.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. We're on now to item 3. It's the minutes. To confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of January 2025. Members, are you happy with the minutes of the 8th of January 2025? Okay, we'll take those as approved. Thank you, and I'll sign them later. Okay, so we're now on to the meat of the meeting. So let me just see. We've had a few changes. I just wanted to let you know what those are. So the application under item 5, application 24018020, that's land at Kingston Fields Farm. If you look at the update sheet, members, you'll see that in the absence of the parish council and any other registered speakers, in accordance with the constitution, the application is delegated to the head of development. So we won't be considering that tonight. Item 6 on the agenda is application 2402767 Longwood Park, Ullenhall Lane, Ullenhall. And subsequent to the publication of the agenda, that application has been withdrawn by the applicant. So we can move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is application 2302-185, outline. It's land south of Stockton Road, Napton on the Hill. And I'd like to invite Louise Coleman, the case officer, to present the application, please. When you're ready, Louise.
Thank you, Chair. This application is an outline application for the erection of 13 custom and self-built dwellings, public open space and associated works, with all matters for approval except for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of individual build plots. The application site is located in the northern edge of Napton on the Hill village, identified by the black dot on the map. The site, which is demarked by the red line and comprises of 2 hectares of agricultural land, which is bordered by mature trees and hedgerows. An existing pond lies within the north-western corner of the site and is surrounding land to the northwest comprises of agricultural fields. To the south is existing housing and some commercial uses comprising of a petrol station and public house, and a number of listed buildings are also located within the vicinity of the site and identified in red on the plan. A public footpath, SM47, also crosses the site and is identified by the green hatched line on the plan. The site adjoins the built-up area boundary of the village and is located within the Ironstone Hills Fringe Special Landscape Area. This is the proposed layout that's been submitted. Access to the site is proposed via a Bellmouth Priority Junction off the Stockton Road. The established hedgerow and tree planting around the periphery of the site is proposed to be retained and secured to ensure these areas lie outside plot curtilages. The existing pond within the northwestern corner of the site is proposed to be retained and an additional attenuation basins created. The public right-of-way is proposed to be resurfaced and widened to 3 metres in width, linking the A425 Southern Road to the Stockton Road. And a new lap is proposed to be created within the southeastern corner of the site. The application has been accompanied with a design code which sets out the development principles, considerations and parameters, taking into account the local context and character of the area. The design code includes the suitable materials, separation distances, building lines, active frontages and boundary treatments which would need to be adhered to in any subsequent reserved matter application. Now I'm going to show you some photographs which have been taken from within the site, panning around in a clockwise direction. So firstly, this is a view of the northern boundary which abuts the Stockton Road, where the main access will be derived. This is a view of the eastern boundary, where you can see the rear elevation of the property known as the old police house and the Severn Trent pumping station. In the foreground as well is the petrol station. This is a view looking towards the northern boundary of the site. You can see at our opposite side of the road, opposite side of Southern Road, is the public house, which is the King's Head Inn in the background, and the existing planting again, which is proposed to be retained and enhanced. This is panning around now in the southwestern boundaries. Again, the tree planting existing planting is proposed to be retained. And this is the western boundary. So this is the pond, which is quite well shielded at the moment, which is going to be enhanced and retained. This is a view of the access point. First of all, looking in a westerly direction from the Stockton Road, and then looking in an easterly direction towards Tomlow Road. This is a view of the site from Southern Road looking west, and this is a view looking east. Now, I'd like to point out this is where the public footpath exits or enters into the site at the present moment in time, which is being retained. The alignment of the path is staying the same. And if you'll note, there is a bus stop already in situ and uncontrolled crossing. So as part of the proposals, improvements are proposed with the existing footpath and crossing points, including the widening of the footpaths along Southern Road between the public right-of-way and the junction with Butt Hill. And the pedestrian refuge is proposed to be enhanced currently where there's the uncontrolled crossing. There is one update to note in the, actually two updates to note in the update sheet, and the recommendation is to grant, subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise. We have some speakers on this application, and I'd first of all like to call Councillor Veazey from Napton Parish Council, please. Would you like to make your way up? Not too far, Councillor Veazey. It's fine, really. And it's the right-hand button. You've got 3 minutes, Councillor Veazey, and if you like, I should just give you a little reminder as we approach 30 seconds to go. All right, thank you. I can reassure you your time hasn't started. There we go.
You have to use a card as well.
No, it should have already been on.
Okay, thank you. When you're ready.
Okay. The MAID NDP states that the village will support small-scale development, but at approximately 4.7 acres, this development is bigger than any recent ones in Napton. NPC and residents who voted for the NDP clearly understood what we meant by small-scale. We asked this committee to consider that this development does not meet our definition of small scale and as such breaches the NDP policy 3B. MPC points out that plots 1, 2, 3 and 5 are not adjacent to the built-up area boundary as required by policy 3A. Plot 6 is unnecessarily close to an existing dwelling in breach of policy 3C. Policy 3D requires developments having regard to the character assessment in terms of scale, layout, materials, and retains local distinctiveness to create a sense of place. This development would have a character and density unlike any other in the village and would not meet this policy. Policy 3G requires that development protects and enhances public right-of-way. This development urbanises the rural footpath SM47. According to the report, Napton has committed to 68 homes. However, in November 23, 100 homes were permitted on the former brickyard. This is a brownfield site, admittedly, but the homes will still bring pressure on the community and its infrastructure. When considered in the round, the total effect judged against policy CS16 is a 25.9% increase, considerably over the guidance of 12%. MPC also questions why planners do not mention the 11 self-build homes undergoing the final stages of an approval of a 106 agreement half a mile away and a further 24 in Stockton just over a mile away, all self-build. Transport is a problem. The proposed development is on the north side of the busy A425. Getting to the village centre and other facilities means crossing that road. There is no consideration of the movements across this junction, even though there has been a poor safety record over a number of years, including 2 fatalities in the last 16 years, the most recent being just over 18 months ago. For those choosing to use
30 seconds now.
For those choosing to use the footpath and the central refuge on the 425, visibility is appalling because of the blind corner just westward of the crossroads. It is unlikely that people will walk to the village, causing motorised journeys making sustainability an issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Veazey. So if you'd just like to stay where you are for a minute. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor Veazey, please? Councillor Parry. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. I might have just misheard a point. Could you just reconfirm the number of additional self-build permissions that are in Napton? Was it 20, an additional 24, or was it the 11?
There's 11 in Napton and 24 in Stockton, and the two villages, as you probably are aware,
Yeah,
pretty
sure.
close.
So there would be 24. Right, so there would be technically 48 self-build within...
No, 24 and 11. So
24 and
35,
11. 35.
I think. I haven't got my shoes and socks
No,
off
that's
yet.
fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Fleming.
I think we're away. Has there been any improvement in infrastructure within the villages to cope for these extra 30 plus houses?
Not directly. I suppose we could say that there has been minor improvement to the Severn Trent water supply, but that is because the system was on its last legs and they've had to put a lot of new pipes in from the reservoir at Draycote.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Harding.
Thank you. You talked about density.
Yes.
This is quite a low density site. But would you prefer something a bit more like this sort of hillside development on the other side of the 425?
Hillside was obviously developed quite a long time ago and doesn't meet current policies. So it's not really comparable. But I'm thinking more about the 11 self-build at the bottom of Fells Lane.
Councillor Harding, satisfied with that? And Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Councillor Veazey.
Good evening.
Page 27 of the officer's report has the following sentence. Concerns have been raised over the capacity of the existing sewerage network. Can you provide any information about that, please?
I have limited information. I know that Councillor Rock behind me has more because he's been directly involved with the local MP, Sir Jeremy Wright. But we have a continuing problem with excess flow through the sewage works. We've had a lot of problems with manhole covers being forced open and raw sewage coming into parts of the village. It's been a long-running problem for many years. So whilst I said earlier the water supply has been improved, the sewerage side has not. Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Well, Councillor Veazey, thank you very much for your contribution tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another speaker, a resident, Mr. Paul McKee. If Mr. McKee would like to come up. Thank you. Similarly, good evening, Mr. McKee. Similarly, you have 3 minutes, and when you're ready to go. Okay. I will, over to you. When you're ready to go, I'll start the clock.
This is just under 3 minutes, so I shouldn't need a warning.
Okay, thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Southern Road residents, and we urge you to refuse the application. In our written objections, we raised multiple concerns, such as road and pedestrian safety, distance from local amenities, it being in completely the wrong location, significant drainage and sewerage problems, failure to consult residents. However, you will have read these, so our focus is on the officer's report. It does not appear to be a reasonable or rational basis for the recommendation. Firstly, it is wrong to say that it complies with Napton's policy as small development. Using decisions from other areas to construe the meaning of small misinterprets Napton's plan and is wrong in principle. Napton's plan would be construed by the courts as Napton intended, not by reference to other developments in other areas. 13 houses on a large site is not small. Secondly, it is wrong to assess the site as fulfilling a self-build need. The report acknowledges that there is no demand for so many self-builds within Napton. Only 4 are mentioned in the register. It justifies the recommendation by the perceived need in the district. That is wrong in principle. Demand is location specific. Someone wanting to build in Leamington will not buy a plot in Napton. Granting permissions in the wrong locations will not reduce the future pressure on the council to grant permission where people do want to build. If you look at the district as a whole, the report acknowledges there is currently oversupply. Estimates of future need may well be wrong. Self-build demand is reducing since building costs have increased so much. People on the register who have decided against self-build do not remove themselves, so even the current figures are likely to be an overestimate. A large proportion of the people on the register have a total cost limit of 250,000 for the plot and building costs. Some have a limit of 150,000. These plots will be unaffordable due to the nature of the site and the infrastructure costs. Given the prohibitive cost, there will be little demand for the plots within the 12-month period. This will lead to an application to lift the self-build restriction and possibly for more dwellings to make the site viable to a developer when the plots don't sell. This could be seen as an exploitation of a self-build planning loophole by the developer. Finally, there is no proper explanation as to why the site is suitable despite issues that contravene many planning policies. The council's own published draft policy acknowledges that the government does not expect councils to grant permission for self-builds on sites that are otherwise unsuitable for housing, such as open countryside. The report acknowledges that this site is in open countryside and does not comply with numerous policies, yet suggests that self-build needs trump those issues. It recommends grant despite its unsuitability. We strongly request that the application is rejected. We do not believe the conclusion reached is reasonable or rational on the evidence in the report. Thank you for hearing our concerns. And if anybody wants a hard copy, there's one there.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Members, does anyone have a question for Mr. McKee? Councillor Parry, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. McKee. You mentioned that the Napton neighbourhood plan identifies a need for a small development for self-build. Can you just advise me how many houses or how many units small is from Napton PC's perspective in the neighbourhood plan?
I'm not a Napton Parish Councillor, so you'd be best addressing the question to the councillors.
But the perception of a small development, how many units would be?
Is well under 10, I would suggest. So the development that's already underway for self-builds of 11 on Fells Lane is already large, I would suggest. This is even larger, and the site is significantly larger.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Parry. Any other members have a question for Mr. McKee? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. McKee, for your contributions. Okay, our next speaker is Mike Skinner, who's the agent for the developer. Mr. Skinner, good evening. I'd like to come up and take a seat. Okay, now the same format, the right-hand button to turn the microphone on, and Mr. Skinner, you have 6 minutes to respond. So when you're ready, thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I'm grateful for the comprehensive work of the planning officer in assessing this application and for the technical commentary provided in her report, to which leads to her recommendation for an approval. As a member of the National Custom and Self-Build Association, Landstrom have been working to connect aspiring self-builders with suitable plots since 2017. In collaboration with the landowners of this parcel here in Napton, we're proposing to bring forward this site as a genuine opportunity for local self-builders. Our role will be to install the access roads, drainage systems, footpaths, play areas, an extensive scheme of landscaping and public open spaces, which extend to more than half the site's area. Within the individual plots, aspiring local self-builders will be able to independently design and commission their own homes, with no ties to any specific house builder or developer. This is self-build in its truest sense. Having now heard the Parish Council speak, I would like to first address some of those points raised by providing some background to our journey to date. At the Neighbourhood Plan referendum in May 2021, 78% of voters in Napton-on-the-Hill voted yes in favour of the Neighbourhood Plan, which specifically included Policy 3 in support of self-build at this location. These 458 local residents had taken the time to engage with the Neighbourhood Plan process and see it through to adoption. These 458 residents clearly recognise the benefits of allowing small numbers of self-built homes as an alternative to large-scale developer-led estates. It is within this context that we first made our request to work with a local landowner to meet the local needs for self-built plots and in full accordance with the development plan. An initial proposal was subject to a pre-app in June 2022, where officers concluded that a development of 20 plots would, in their view, be considered appropriate and small scale and capable of being policy compliant. Shortly afterwards, a draft proposal for 20 plots was presented to Napton Parish Council at a public meeting, where various aspects of the project were discussed in an open Q&A session. After that public session, we received a number of approaches from aspiring self-builders looking to acquire a plot once available, for example, from those within the village looking to downsize into a more suitable home for their retirement needs. 10 months later, and in response to that initial parish meeting, a smaller scale application for 16 plots was submitted. And during the course of the application, we have duly considered the submitted comments from local households, which have primarily been those in close proximity to the site. Where possible, we have heeded those requests and have incorporated many changes to designs along the way, such as by providing a larger buffer area to the rear of gardens, reducing maximum roof heights throughout the development site, and by altering the red line boundary to provide further space between the development and its neighbours. We appreciate the feedback received from those neighbours and believe the final development has improved because of it. Following the specific advice of the planning officer, we were requested to further reduce the quantity of plots down to 13 by removing the plots in the northernmost corner of the site in exchange for additional public open space. We immediately agreed to this request and updated the layout in November 2023. Over the course of a further year, we've been making incremental improvements to the application at the request of the council and local residents in order to satisfy technical aspects of the scheme, such as detail of surface finishes to roads, drainage, bin storage areas, material pallets within the design code. The final proposal before you today is significantly smaller and lower density than the 20 plots that were approved in principle at pre-app, and a fraction of the 50 houses that had once been proposed, not approved, by a national house builder. Clearly, there is a balance that must be struck between meeting the local needs for self-build, making the best use of available sustainable land, and recognising and conserving the unique character of the village. I believe we have now found the correct balance. Following this collaborative approach with neighbours and the council, we are here today with an application that has supported the planning officer, all technical statutory consultees, and primarily the support of an up-to-date neighbourhood plan. There are no material reasons why this proposal should not be approved today. As well as being policy compliant, this project shall deliver real benefits which may further bolster the case for your approval. The list of approved documents includes a design code which shall ensure that individual families may design and build their own modern homes to meet their specific needs in a cohesive manner and within a set of restrictions for scale and use of local materials to safeguard the local character. The design code also contains a requirement for homes to follow the highest standards of energy efficiency, use of solar and renewables, to be low carbon impact, to require EV charging. These will be highly insulated passive homes. They could be single-storey homes for retirees, they could be family homes. By trusting individuals to design and commission their own homes, we are opening the opportunity for these homes to meet lifetime needs, to be adaptable, to cater for disabilities, to be built to a high standard. These self-builders will be the people with the energy, resources and incentives to contribute in the long term to a thriving village community. These are the same aspirations held by those 458 Napton residents that authored and voted in Policy 3 in their current neighbourhood plan.
That's 30 seconds to go.
In conclusion, and on behalf of many local families that do aspire to build local homes, I respectfully request that you approve this application. I would be very keen to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skinner. Within your time, easily. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Skinner? Yes, Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I wonder if you can just explain for me, obviously the actual land area is large, and from what you were saying, there were, in previous applications, more plots in the northern part. Can you explain why you haven't maximise the whole area and have a slightly smaller open space in order to minimise the density of those units, because they're all very bunched together, and create a little bit more space around each unit?
Good question. So our starting point before my company's involvement was the history of the site, which included an application for 50 houses from Bloor Homes. And that scheme had, in principle, been approved by the local landscape consultant for the council on the basis of its density. The issues with that site were lack of 5-year housing, or you had a 5-year housing land supply at that point, and some of the plots were too close to local houses. So taking the principles from that site of 50, we significantly cut down the density of the housing. And this image might be a bit misleading, because those pink areas are not the house footprints. They'd be gigantic if that was the case. These are the areas that people could build in. They're the build footprints. So the actual houses will be much smaller within those areas. These are just... Does that make sense? So it might look on that plan to be a very dense scheme with very small gaps between houses, but actually that's not the case. And the design code does include a requirement for certain distances between houses, which I think is up to 6 metres, so very large. It is a very low density scheme, acknowledging the character of this side of Stockton Road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Further questions, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. On the question of density, could you put some numbers to that? How many per acre or per hectare does that scheme represent?
I may need Louis' help with that, but let me have a quick look in my notes. So the developed area for plots is 0.85 hectares, and there's 13, so 13, so that's what, approximately 15 dwellings per hectare. So that's pretty low scale. You know, modern densities, you might be more like 30 or 40.
Well, working assumption then is 15 per hectare. Fine,
Yeah, I think that's a good guess.
My second question, I referred back to the question I asked the parish councillor to do with the existing sewage system. Are you sat there saying that the existing sewage system in Knapton can cope with the needs of another 13 properties? That's an either yes or no. If it's a no, who and how is the shortfall in capacity to be addressed?
Okay, so our development scheme does include a new foul pumping station. So that will cater specifically for these plots. And that's sited sort of just to the north of the access road. That's where the pumping station will be. So in that sense, the sewage is dealt separately to the existing Knapton network. If that weren't to be viable for any reason, it still remains open to us to secure permits with the Environment Agency for private treatment plants. So you might be aware more commonly in rural communities you have individual sewage tanks that could be a solution if the mains capacity wasn't there. Sorry,
Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Probably.
Well, I interpret, you tell if I got this wrong. You've got a plan A, which you think will work, and if plan A doesn't work, you have a plan B, which probably will work. Is that more or less correct?
We have I mean, I'm not a sewage or drainage engineer, but we do have a team of consultants who have designed this in detail and have a scheme that they're saying works.
Thank you. That line of questioning, you're happy with that, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Fleming, I understand you had a question.
Looking at the local housing needs survey, there are 6 people that have expressed an interest in 13 plots. What's your projected timescale for this development from start to finish? I'm just thinking of the first person that moves in. How long are they going to be living in a building site for it to be finished?
That's a good question. I mean, The housing needs survey refers specifically to affordable housing, which this isn't necessarily. This is market housing. So the idea that the housing needs survey has a number of people that would consider self-build plots is useful because this development could help meet their needs, but it's not. I think it's important to understand that it's not directly related. In terms of timescales, individual self-builders aren't motivated to land bank or hang around, like the big developers. Once they've bought a plot, the finance clock is ticking. They want to get going and build it. So these aren't grand designs types where people are going to be laying brick by brick for years and years. There's going to be incentives to finish them and move in. So typically 3 to 4 years is what you'd expect from securing a plot and full completion, but often much less than that.
Another question, the public open space, how will that be maintained? Will that be devolved to the local parish council, or are you looking at having a sort of a private company that looks after the public open space?
Thank you. Our preference would be for the parish council to adopt it, and I imagine Louise might confirm that the Section 106 agreement will require us to offer it to the parish council in the first instance. If they didn't want to accept management or ownership of that, it would then be looked after in a management company owned solely by the residents. So no third parties involved. That's our current plan.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Littlewood.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My colleague here has mentioned that the needs indicated are some 6 self-builders from the local area. Plots for 13. What work will be done in terms of acceptable road surfaces for those people who have completed their work while other plots are being either sold or considered or being worked on?
It's a really good question, and it is one of the sort of annoyances of self-build delivery that's unavoidable. Our plan is that we finish the roads fully from the outset, and then the management company who will own this private access road will be in charge of policing any damage. So should someone do any damage while they're trying to build their house, they'd be liable to repair that under their cost.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Okay, the management company will be responsible for the maintenance, etc. What control, what powers will the residents have to ensure that the management company actually do the jobs they're supposed to be doing?
Great question. The management company will be owned entirely by the plot holders, so there'll be 13 shares in that company, and they'll have their own board and process for that.
Looking around for any further questions. I can't see any, but Mr. Skinner, I've got one for you myself. We heard from the other speakers that there was questions in their mind about local need compared to district or further away need. How would you respond to their comments that people wouldn't wish to take up one of these plots if they weren't local people?
It's a great question, and the need for self-build, genuine self-build plots here, I'll make that distinction, is substantial. There are hundreds of people that sign up to these registers hoping to build their dream house. A lot of the opportunity gets permitted to custom builders, people who will build what they want and give you a choice of kitchen or bathroom, that sort of thing, and maybe some layout input. But the genuine self-build, the stuff that we all aspire to do one day, very, very thin opportunity on the ground. And over the course of the application period, we have publicised to a very small extent, and these plots could be marketed and sold 5 times over. There's this huge demand. And it's the kind of people that may not have even signed up to the Stratford Self-Build Register, even though that maybe 300 or 400 people have, I believe. So,
okay. Mr. Skinner, thank you very much. I think that finishes our questions. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you for your time.
Our final speaker on this application is Councillor Rock. If you'd like to come forward, Councillor Rock, please. Good evening. Good evening. And I think you probably know the score. And I'm just going to remind you that you have 5 minutes, and if you'd like 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Chairman,
Reminder.
I did send some pictures in, which I think officers have.
Okay.
Before I start, I am advised by the monitoring officer I need to declare 2 interests. One, I chaired the Customer Self-Build Task Group in 2022, and also my own name is on the register of self-build builders, but I have my own plot, so I'm completely separate from an interest in any respect of this particular site.
Okay, thank you. So when you're ready, if you'd like to kick off, and I'll start the timer.
Are the pictures ready?
I've started.
Can I pause?
No, well, I started it, actually.
Oh, right, okay. Right, the report concludes that this application does not conform with the core strategy and many policies, but then says harm is outweighed by a future projected shortfall in custom and self-build numbers for the end of the year. In the district, we have a surplus of 18 self-build plots now. Within 3 miles of this site, there are 24 plots with a report to grant, either from an officer or from this committee. So the council has to find only 30 across the district during this year, about 3 a month. This is about half the rate we achieved last year. Without this site, we are well ahead of the rate to deliver the quota of self-build for 2025. Furthermore, by searching the council's records last weekend, I have found 10 custom and self-build applications pending. I've got the application references here. I query granting an application on the basis of what we think the supply situation might be at some point in the future. So the only reason to grant is, in my opinion, unjustified, but against it there are many policies, as the report concedes. This is a fundamentally unsuitable, unsustainable site for a residential estate in open countryside, not in any allocation of any sort. It has 2 alternative walking routes to the facilities in the centre of the village, 3/4 of a mile away over the hill, but is segregated from the community on the other side of the main road. On page 13 and 14 of the report, I disagree about the NDP clauses. Clause A, this is a large plot, extreme low density site with questionable affordability. Clause B, as you've heard from previous speakers, this is not a small scale either by areas or numbers. The report says that small is justified by precedent. I word searched the inspector's decision for Fenny Compton, which is also in my ward, and any reference to that site being small is simply not there. What the inspector actually did say was that economic benefits and contributions to off-site diversity were small. Nor, having watched the video and read the papers, can I find such an interpretation in the Stockton one either, but in any case that's not Napton's NDP. But in a ministerial statement, which I have here, in the 24th of November 2014, on self-build, Planning Minister Brandon Lewis indicated small scale being less than 10 units and allowed local authorities to further define it as less than 5 units in special circumstance. The Napton NDP process was also begun in 2014 and was consulted upon in late 2018. So when people voted for the NDP, surely they would not expect this, the biggest housing site in Napton by area, to be considered small. Surely they were expecting small to be single figures of homes, just like the minister. And there is evidence of that expectation in the consultation comments, by the way. And also, CS18 uses 5 as a threshold. Could I have slide 2, please? Clause D on page 14. The site falls within character 9 of the NDP character assessment, and its proposed design does not conform to the character described in the assessment, nor with the adjacent to Area 8, which refers to the high density of housing. The character assessment passed by the examiner raises adverse comments about the pedestrian highway crossing and footpath. The committee would do well to read that assessment before determining if it aligns with it or not. Sections 9.7, 9.10 and 9.33 are particularly relevant. Clause G, like the parish council, I can't see that this enhances the footpath across the site. The arrows show one of the 2 walking routes from the site emerging from that footpath, and issues with this site have been a constant concern. Can I have picture 3, please? This is a shot from Severn Trent's website.
That's 30 seconds.
On the last paragraph of page 12, the report says that there is a lack of evidence that infrastructure cannot cope. The Napton Sewage Works has a national press publicised history of having the worst overflow spill record over years, not just in the district, but in England. The MP, the parish council and I have met to discuss this with Severn Trent in 2022. Since that time, the district council has given permission for 100 more homes, and it has continued to spill even through last month. I hope you will see minute 99 from the regulatory committee.
That's the 5 minutes up, I'm afraid, Councillor Rock.
With
Thank you.
paragraph 27 of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I would have given you a couple more seconds. I didn't see if you were going to carry on for a couple more pages, so I brought that to an end.
That was the last paragraph, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Members, any questions for Councillor Rock, please? Ward Member, Councillor Harvey.
Can I repeat my question, my line of questioning about sewers and sewerage and capability, capacities and so on? Can you elucidate, can these drains cope with another 13 houses, please? Okay, so there's, on that picture there are 2 Severn Trent sewage facilities that, one is a pumping station right adjacent to the site. Which residents tell me, so it's hearsay, does occasionally spill into the site. However, the site that I'm talking about is the actual sewage works. I had a very unpleasant time going and look at it, but that has got constraints in it. It's the size of the pipe that comes in there. When I met with the MP and the parish council, we spent quite a lot of time talking to them about what they could do. Severn Trent didn't respond, so it's not really for me to speak facts on their behalf. But the spill record is there. I've got what they say. It's a matter of public record. It's spilled. I've got the numbers here. 270 times 6,000 hours, 395. It's just continuing to spill into the local watercourses. It's been the worst in England by a matter of public record. No infrastructure has been put in since that time. It continues to spill now.
Thank you, Councillor Rock. I think you've made your point in response to the question. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Fleming, thank you.
Councillor Rock. I should probably have asked this to the parish council, but I'll ask you. The local housing needs survey, how recent was that done? Because I've just looked in here, and it wants bungalows and things similar to that. So, how does this fit in with the housing needs survey?
Yeah, I think the officer updated that between when it was deferred and last time. So there was an earlier one, but it's just been updated. Although the numbers have changed, the character of the requirements have changed. So I think the numbers have shifted, but I think Louise can probably update that for you objectively. So I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but I think there is a modest requirement, but it would appear to me, I'm going to express an opinion, I'm not quite sure how much it would interact with this particular requirement, but I would defer to the officer in case I get it wrong.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Parry.
Thank you. Councillor Rock, you made reference to CS18. Would I be right you were comparing this site to an open market dwelling site whereby small from an open market dwelling site is considered as 5 or less because it doesn't, the affordable housing element is not present for a small site. Therefore, were you referring a small site from your interpretation for self-build would be the equivalent to a small site for an open market development, which according to CS18 would be 5 dwellings or less, because a development of 5 dwellings or less, affordable housing does not apply.
I'm referring to my notes. If that is right in part to that. So the CS18 element is correct, but I took my guidance from what it said in the Napton Neighbourhood Development Plan comments, but primarily from the Minister's statement, which is a ministerial statement which I have here, which specifically said, as I read out, 10, and local authorities can make it 5. So that's where I got that from.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking around the table to see if there's any further questions. I'm getting blanks. I do have one myself, please, Councillor Rock, if you could just help me understand something I was a little bit confused. Mr. Skinner explained to us that the proposal originally was for 20. That was reduced from, with consultation, to 16. That was reduced again to 13. I'm just wondering how you respond to those reductions and what sort of number you would feel would be acceptable on this site.
Well, Mr. Skinner explained that there'd been engagement with the local community. If he said so, he must think there is. I attend all the parish council meetings that I can. I must have missed that one. I don't recollect that, but if he says he did, he must have done. The local residents behind me cannot recollect any consultation with them, so presumably there's a question about how effective that was. The chairman of the parish council can't recollect a significant engagement, but presumably it has occurred. I don't quite know what form that was in. In terms of the development of this particular site for housing, in my opinion, it is not suitable for housing of any numbers because of the accident record that we've had, the segregation from the main part of the village from that site I showed. We have a great deal of difficulty now with pedestrians crossing that road. The week before last, we've had various meetings with the police and.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rock. I think you've answered the question that you don't see any number at all, actually. And we can pick up questions to the case officer in respect of statistics and evidence. Thank you very much for your contribution, Councillor Rock. It was appreciated. Oh, hang on. Councillor Rock's just left the table. I should just bring him back. Councillor Littlewood had an... You're not finished yet, I'm afraid. Councillor Littlewood.
The walk has worn me out.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, the question occurred to me during that last comment from Councillor Rock. Councillor Rock, good evening. Sewerage system. You mentioned there's been a large number of outflows from the system, overflows into the watercourses. That's not uncommon in the areas we know. Surface water loading is a problem historically. Do these overflows come at a time of increased rainfall and flooding as we've been experiencing, or is it a continuous thing?
Again, I don't want to exceed my expertise in any way, but the answer is yes. It relates to stormwater overflows.
So it's not just a matter of, in your opinion, as the ward member, it's not just a matter of the loading from the housing, but it's the general capacity under the new climate conditions.
The issue from the exchanges I've had with Severn Trent, the issue is it's a combined sewage system. So if there was no stormwater going into the sewage system, there wouldn't be any stormwater overflow if it was only domestic sewage going in, or any business going into it. So the question is how it's dealt with. It seems there isn't a proper methodology or system for doing it nationally, and I think that Napton is probably just a worst example of the difficulties we get doing it. It's not quite clear how these things are funded, which is why we've got a national...
Thank you. I'll draw that to a conclusion. Thank you, Councillor Littlewood, for that. Right, I'm guessing no further questions. Councillor Rock, thank you very much for your contributions. It's appreciated. Okay, members, so we move on to your opportunity to ask the officers points of clarification. Anybody got a question? Councillor Adam was first. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, so much has been made of the definition of small scale with inclusion of ministerial statements and appeal decisions. I know you've got you've elaborated on this to some extent within the papers. Could you comment on what's been represented here tonight, please?
Okay, yeah. The officers' comments on small scale can be found at top of page 14 under B, and the Napton plan requires that schemes are on a small scale. Beyond that, it's a matter of planning judgment. I know what was said about what the planning minister said in 2014, what his expectations were, but that didn't follow into policy. So at that point, there could have been a policy that said all self-builds shall be no more than 5 or 10 or whatever it may be. That's not the case. So it's left as a matter of planning judgment, and that's why you see officers benchmarking the point there against similar schemes in other villages of a similar size to Napton to give a yardstick. But beyond that, it's a planning judgment, and the things to take into account are the size of the village, the size of the site, all the things you do in terms of proportionality and scale.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Councillor Parry was next. Councillor Parry, your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was really Councillor Adam has kind of raised areas that I wanted clarification. But what I would also like to know, whilst this is considered, while the officers consider 13 as small scale, and it is acknowledged that comments are made stating the development has to be 10 dwellings or less to be considered small scale, did the officers also, what is the impact of the cumulative effect of having additional self-build plots in the same area? Because obviously there is another self-build site in Napton of 13, and is that a consideration on the cumulative impact as well in terms of the planning balance?
I think members need to be aware that when I think the starting point is there is another development in Napton, I think it's 11, that has a recommendation for grant, which is subject to the signing of a Section 106 agreement. And until that decision has been issued, that may not be until October of this year. So that may then roll on to the following rolling supply. That's why it's very difficult for us to sit and say that 11 can be taken as a granted to be determined and to be added to the figure currently. That's why there is a need district-wide to provide 54 homes, customer self-built homes, up to 30th of October of this year. So whilst we have in the pipeline developments that are coming forward, which is exactly what we need to keep doing, until those decisions have been issued, they can't be attached in terms of knocking them down in terms of the 54.
Okay, Councillor Parry. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. There's been mention by various speakers referred to the NDP. As I understand it, the NDP is more recent than the core strategy. Is that correct? That's my starting point. Fine. In which case, does the officer have any, can the officer appoint members of the committee at any elements of the NDP where the NDP takes precedence? That would cause her concern.
The NDP would take precedence on the precise issue of self-build. Our core strategy, the district's core strategy, was adopted before the Self-Build Act or just after it and before it had been enacted. So our core strategy doesn't cover self-build. It doesn't say where they should go. It doesn't say how many, etc. Napton's plan does, and that's why you see a robust assessment by the officer, again going back to the bottom of page 13 and right through to page 15. Against the key policy in Napton's plan, which is policy 3. And what that does that a core strategy doesn't do is talks about how different sites should come forward, in particular, where are we? All of the criteria that would be expected to be met for a self-build scheme that the core strategy doesn't do. So everything you see on those pages is something that Napton's plan does that the core strategy doesn't do. In particular, I would say the most important thing is it sets out that the scheme should be, correct me here, Louise, adjacent to the built-up area boundary. The core strategy doesn't say that, so in that regard, we give more weight. In fact, we give full weight to the Napton plan.
Thank you. Councillor Adam next, please.
Thank you. Something occurred to me when I saw the map that Councillor Rock put up for Napton as a whole, and how this site is off Southern Road, generally speaking, which is obviously is village in two halves to some extent. With regards to the character of the part of the village on Southern Road, how would you characterise that in terms of buildings? Because from this point of view, it looks like they're more single dwellings off Southern Road as opposed to cul-de-sacs from that road, if you see what I mean. It feels that the character of this development is different from the neighbouring developments within this exact area, if you see what I mean.
The character in terms of allowing for development, I think that's one of the points of the evolution of this application, is that initially, and also together with the development of Bloors for 50, it was one of the concerns of officers that the development for 50 from Bloors, it went pretty much through from most of the entirety of the site. There was some development that was left, areas that was left free on the northwestern part of the site. But as part of this development, we've focused the development closer towards the existing built form, and with the provision of the landscaping that is in terms of bringing the development forward, it retains its character. It aligns with the character, in officers' opinion, with what is already established, because there is built form as well on the opposite side of the development in terms of the commercial as well.
Just to pick up on good night for this, isn't it? There we go. The character of the Southern Road, as you can see there, it's a fairly loose and eclectic character. There's no strong regimented character. There's a level, I would say, of ribbon development on the northern side, but again, the buildings there are fairly loose and of all shapes and sizes. Similarly, on the opposite side of Southern Road, Hillside Croft, that isn't ribbon development. That's, I would say, probably backland development to some degree, but again, you can see from the blocks, large variety of shapes and sizes. So my take on the character of the area is there's no strong character, and that's really your starting point looking at this. How does it fit with that character? But certainly there's no strong character for Southern Road that I can see.
Thank you. I did have Councillor Passingham next, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One is the sewage. It was indicated that the developer didn't know whether the sewage system, existing sewage system, would cope, and he had a fallback position of providing a private sewage treatment plant. If that's the situation, and we know there's so many problems in every village and town about overflowing sewage, and we know from the councillor Rock that the amount there's overflow all the time happening from Napton sewage station. Shouldn't we make it a condition that a private sewage treatment plant is provided?
I think we'll have to, what is proposed is a condition to require foul drainage details to be submitted prior to any commencement of development occurring. So that aspect will be resolved prior to any development being brought forward on the site.
And how will that be resolved then? How will you...
That will be in consultation with Severn Trent directly, together with the LLFA.
Sorry, as I understand it, Severn Trent never comment on all of these because they've got to accept any sewage that's thrown their way, so to speak.
Before any condition would be discharged, we would need to have the agreement of Severn Trent.
Do you have a second question, Councillor Passingham?
Sorry, second question is about public open space. There's been many issues with public open space on new developments, and I understood there was a new SPD being developed that tightened up the regulations over public open space for new developments. In particular, not allowing, as I understood it, that there would no longer be management committees, that it would be mandatory that the town or the district would take over the public open space.
That's absolutely correct. Part L of the RSPT identifies that. The issue you just need to be advised is that as I'm sure the parish council wouldn't wish to be adopting areas which we call infrastructure areas. So that's the access road. It's set out in the committee report under the POS section. So areas in the on-site attenuation pond, the wildlife corridors, in incidental open space areas wouldn't be considered as public open space. The remainder, however, would be. So what is usable public open space could then be adopted by the parish council, and or if not, they chose not to, it would offer to the district council, and if we chose not to take this on, it would go to then a management company.
Just to clarify then, that what the developer said was wrong, that they were setting up a management company.
What he has said is correct, because the infrastructure elements would be managed by the management company, because the if it's offered to the parish council, there would be 30-year commuted sum, but the residents, there isn't the public general public interest. The access road, for example, and maintenance of that, or the attenuation pond, that would need to be separated out.
Okay, that's clear. Councillor Passingham, to you now. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
I'm going to get boring about sewers. Just so I understand how to evaluate this in my own mind, we have on the one hand Mr. Skinner saying he has a plan A and he's got a plan B. On the other hand, we've got Councillor Rock saying Napton has an inherent problem with the system. Am I right? I think there would be a general concern from councillors around the table about whether the sewerage system can cope. However, this is an outline application.
and therefore I'm wondering whether the right interpretation from my individual point of view is to say, yes, I am concerned about the sewage issues, but that at an outline stage, this isn't make or bust, so to speak. It's not critical because it's at the reserves stage that there would have to be practical considerations met in order for a reserved application to be approved. So have I got the sense of that correct about what weight or not I should put on questions to do with sewage systems?
You're absolutely right. It would be dealt with at a later stage. It would, rather than reserve matters, it would be condition 22 that requires the submission of foul drainage details. And that's where the applicant's comments about this plan A, plan B would come in. They'd try plan A. If that didn't work, if it met with objection, they could try plan B and have an on-site solution. But that's where it would be dealt with, and that may come in at the same time as reserve matters. It might not. But the point is that condition 22 would fix that. I would also add that condition 22, to some extent, like all of these conditions, does tread a little on the toes of building regs, because in order to get building regulations, you have to have a sewer connection or a package treatment plant. So it's actually covered by both the planning and the building regs.
Thank you.
That's very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
Sorry, coming back again for the planning officer. When reference was made to small scale and when the planning inspector considered sites in Stockton and Fenny Compton as small scale, did either Fenny Compton or Stockton have a sound neighbourhood development plan at the time of the inspector's decision?
Fenny Compton certainly does have a neighbourhood plan in place. They don't have a policy regarding custom and self-built housing, and I can't confirm the actual date of the neighbourhood plan for Stockton, but I'm sure that they have one. Sorry. Oh, they don't. Oh, sorry. Okay.
What I'm interested to know is, did they have...
Fenny Compton does.
Did they have an adopted neighbourhood development plan as far as Stockton was concerned in 2021 and as far as Penny Compton was concerned in 2022?
We can say what we can answer what the case is now, but if you want us to go back and check, it might take a little bit of time to check what the position was. It would probably need a check on the actual appeal decision, so we just need to go back and check that, unless you know.
I suppose if I can just...
I do know Fenny Compton because I was the case officer, and it did have a neighbourhood plan, adopted neighbourhood plan. I can't say for Stockton.
All right, are you happy with that, Councillor Parry? Do you want to look into this in further detail? I'm slightly concerned. I'm not understanding the point that you're hoping to get to, the relevance of this.
It makes a big difference if neither had adopted neighbourhood development plans that was focused on supporting a small development. That is my point.
Okay.
But if they didn't have a neighbourhood development plan that was focused on the small development, and then the inspector classified that small developments, in his opinion, was 12 and 13, when there was absence of a neighbourhood development plan, talking about self-build as small in the neighbourhood development plan.
So you're seeking clarification as to whether or not in these neighbourhood development plans the self-build sites had been identified as being acceptable if they were small. So you want to know whether or not they were identified in these plans. The officer's prepared to have a look at that for you. Just hold on a second. Just, I'm being advised that we need a bit of time to look at those appeal decisions, so we might need a few minutes to do that. Are there any further questions? Councillor Fleming. I think we'll carry on taking questions, actually, for the time being. That's a very specific question that you've asked.
Referring back to Councillor Harvey's question about looking at it from an outline perspective and then tightening it up when we get to, I think, 22, clause 22 you were just talking about. Does that mean we would have to pass it outline and then review it when you're going for reserved matters and whatever? Or, I mean, what is the situation? Are we passing outline and looking at that at reserved matters stage, or do we not give a decision tonight in that respect?
It's a detailed matter, therefore, if you were to grant it tonight, our recommendation is that you include condition 22 along with all the other ones. And condition 22 would require at a later stage the developer to submit details of the foul drainage for the site for approval by the council. And at that point, we'd speak to statutory consultees. And if it was okay, we'd discharge it. If it wasn't, we'd refuse it. And they'd have to come up with another plan, perhaps plan B.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Just bear with us a minute. Councillor Parry, you're indicating that you would like to follow up.
Well, all I would just say, according to SDC site, Fenny Compton Neighbourhood Plan was actually made on the 24th of April 2023, if that helps officers.
I think I'm going to have to come back to what I said earlier, Councillor Parry, that ultimately scale is a matter of planning judgment. Officers have put those cases in there as examples of where schemes have been deemed acceptable in villages of a similar size to Napton. The weight that you can give that, I would say, is moderate because it's not the same village and it's not the same test. But I would say that the term small scale and any test around it should be the same wherever it is. In the district, outside the district, it's a planning judgment, and the things you would need to look at is the number of dwellings proposed tonight, the size of Napton, and do a comparison as to whether, in the context of the size of the whole village, 13 is a small number.
Thank you, Richard. I'm looking around the table for any other questions, but I've got one. I've left it to the end. We've talked a lot about scale, small or otherwise, but members reading the objections and listening to the parish council, the ward member and the resident, would have picked up there are some significant concerns about the road traffic records here. And whilst I haven't seen any specific evidence from the ward member, I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on the reality for us. Just how bad is this crossing, and how important is the road, the vehicle movements from this development if it were to go ahead with 13 houses? Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Chair. Prior to the meeting this evening, I have gone back to the Highway Authority to ask for their most up-to-date figures with respect to accident data within the vicinity of the site. Focusing as well on the Tomlow Road and Southern Road Junction, which seem to be areas of concern. And within the vicinity of the site, there has been 2 accidents which have been recorded, one of which was in 2024, and there was another one in 2023. One has to be discounted because it was an unfortunate element where the driver blacked out. So that's the cause of the accident. And the other one was driver error. But again, within the vicinity of the site, but both were identified as slight accidents. In terms of the Highway Authority, you need to be aware that they identify, they only look at within the last 5 years as being considered to be up-to-date data. Otherwise, it's deemed as historical. And then in terms of traffic generation, this development would generate about, in peak hours, additional flows of around 8.5 vehicles, additional loads on the network. So in scale, the Highway Authority consider this to be extremely low.
Sorry, just clarify, that was 8.5 vehicles, what, per hour in the peak times, Louise, is that?
Yes, I think it was. Sorry. Let me just get the...
Please.
Get that up. Sorry. God. There's my presentation. Sorry.
Has anybody else got a question for the case officer? Just, thank you. I'll just hold you for a second. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry. This is based on 16, but I know it's basically for 13 new dwellings would give rise to 8.5 two-way vehicle trips in both the AM and PM peak periods. This equates to approximately 1 new vehicle trip every 7 minutes in both the AM and PM peaks.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. Councillor Littlewood.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've actually got two questions, separate subjects, just following on from the vehicles. Are those vehicle movements calculated on residents' movements, or do they include, which is now a modern issue, Amazon delivery vans and the like, and other delivery companies are available?
All traffic data that's produced by independent consultants for applicants and assessed by the county council, they use something called TRIX. Don't ask me what it stands for, but what it does is it takes examples and continuously updates examples of developments all over the country and how much traffic it churns out basically, and it comes up with a certain number for different floor spaces or different types of dwellings, and it will include visitors, it'll include delivery vans and what have you.
Thank you, that's clear. And a second question, if I may, Chair. Going back to the consideration of what is small scale and not, I just looked up while you were looking up on your machines there that the Self-Build and Custom Built Act, as amended, was in 2016. It seems reasonable that if the NDP was drafted and made after that date, that their definition of small scale should include what should be what would be represented by that act. So I find that, I'll be honest, I find the subjectivity of the definition of small scale very, very worrisome. It could be, if I may say so, considered by the man on the Clapham omnibus as being fitting to the argument. It's rather fitting the facts to meet the theory, and so I'm a bit concerned about that. So if I was on, I have great sympathy with the with the parish council that they've gone to the trouble of getting a policy in place for small developments, and yet that is a movable feast. So I really would like to have a more defined idea of what really small scale is in this case.
It's not an unusual issue when you're dealing with policies, because policies have to be written to give flexibility. And it's rare you find a policy that says thou shalt have no more than 10, a specific number. And I suspect our parishes are finding the same sort of headache we've had as a district council writing local plans over the years. You write it, and it doesn't always mean what you think it means, and it's interpreted by decision takers, and that's just the nature of the system. What I would say is I can only refer you to the Napton Development Plan Policy 3 on self-builds, which we can give full weight to as a committee, but it simply says that one of the criterion is B, it is on a small scale. It doesn't say any more, it doesn't give a number, it just says small scale. So I'll come back to what I've said in previous answers, which is it's within your gift to make a planning judgment as to whether it's small scale in the context of Napton.
Okay, I think that clarifies it for me.
Looking around the table, but I just want to follow up on Councillor Littlewood's point in respect and your response, if you wouldn't mind. 13 houses in relation to the size of Napton. How many houses are there in Napton? Could you just remind us, please?
I knew you were going to answer that, and you can probably tell I don't have an exact number. I am just going to have a very quick look.
200, 300, something like that?
I'm looking at the introduction to the NDP.
Okay, I think, Richard, we've come up with, Councillor Harvey has helped, he's found a reference to it.
Page 7.
Second paragraph, line 2. Napton Village is about circa 450 homes.
So it's 13 against 450. Thank you. Members, any further questions? I know that session went on a long time, and I thank Louise and Richard for helping to support our understanding. But clearly it's this is a tricky application to be considering, and there's been a lot of local objections to it. So I think we've done a good job of that, and thank you, Louise and Richard, for your assistance. So that allows us to move on to the debate and the discussion about this application. Who would like to start? Councillor Adam, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very glad, as you say, that we've been around the houses, as it were, with the points of clarification. I think it's very important. I can't say that I'm a fan of this application. I think there's a number of aspects which are of concern, some of them more technical than others, particularly things like the drainage. I think that's a real concern. The fact that we don't have a response from the statutory consultee on it, well, sorry, not from the consultee on it, means that that's something I'm not satisfied is able to be squared away easily. But more concerning from my point of view is exactly what we've been talking about in terms of the scale of the development. Now looking at, I do know Napton, I grew up one village over from it, so I might have a sort of perspective that not everyone will have on it, but broadly speaking, this site is larger than it feels comfortable to call small scale with relation to not just the village, but where it is within the village. It's on the edge of one half of it, which is, as I alluded to in one of my questions, an effectively linear development along Southern Road, and what's being proposed here is a cul-de-sac off a road which isn't within the village itself. Stockton Road is a farm track which is outside of the village itself, and the access seems incongruous with where cars would access a village from if they're sort of a part of it. I think it puts me in mind of an application that we actually had through committee recently in Harbury, so not very far away, where one of the major concerns was the form of development within the close locality of the site was more linear, opposite sides of the road, and then we were looking at a cul-de-sac in that location, and committee found that they were not happy with that form of development being out of character. I think the same is true here, and I think that can be fairly evident from just looking at it on the map and how the form of it comes. So I think there's a lot there too. And in terms of the density, I think there's almost a catch-22 here. I think ultimately I think the site is too large, and I think that's part of the issue. They've reduced the numbers to try and meet our requirements for making it small scale, but in doing so, they've made something of a contrived design that doesn't fit the character of the area, and I think that's part of the thing that doesn't sit well with me. I'm happy to ruminate on the specific core strategy clauses that might cover. I certainly think that the NDP clause 3 is relevant for going against the officers on this one, and although I don't like making proposals straight off the bat, I'm happy to propose that we do go against the officer's recommendation on this basis, but I'd be keen to see what other members of the committee have to say.
Councillor Adam, can I just be clear on your reason for suggesting to committee that we go against the officer's recommendation in terms of NDP 3? What is it exactly that you are not happy with?
I think that as the planning manager has made clear, we have the opportunity to exercise planning judgment on what we determine small scale. I find that the site itself is not small scale, and therefore the development as a whole in relation to the area of the village which it is attached to.
Thank you for that. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. I would be very much in support of this development if it had come forward with 10 or less self-build units. But as the planning officers have already identified, the NDP for Napton carries full weight, and the balance on small scale is a planning judgment. The actual size of the proposed development and the scale of it is extremely large, and for me, because we've got 13 and the NDP identifies small scale, which I believe is 10 or less, therefore 13 is overdevelopment of the site. And I would second Councillor Adams' proposal for refusal.
In which case, thank you, Councillor Parry. In which case, can I clarify with you, Councillor Adam, that you did make a proposal to go against the recommendation of the officers based upon NDP clause 3?
I did, but I'd also like to say I believe that there's a character issue. I mean, arguably that's enclosed within the NDP clause, at least D, but I think it's potentially CS9 as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Parry, just confirming you're happy to second that proposal?
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Happy to second Councillor Adams' proposal.
Anybody else like to contribute? Councillor Fleming, please.
The very first question I asked tonight on this application was, has the infrastructure been improved to cope with developments such as this within Napton? And we've heard all night that it hasn't. The fundamental part about all of this is the sewage issue. And so from that perspective, apart from, as Councillor Parry said, 13 isn't a small development. On the scale of things, if it was 13 houses in a village with 7,000 houses, it'd be a slightly different thing. So there's several reasons that I would go against the officer's recommendation. So from that perspective, I'll be supporting Councillor Adam, Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Anybody else like to comment? Councillor Littlewood.
I support the proposal, but I think there are other issues as well here that we that make it feel uncomfortable. I mean, yes, highways, for example, for the footpath have approved it because the footpath remains within the plan. But it is totally different in character. It is urbanised. It will be hard standing. It is not open countryside. It changes the character of or the amenity for the other villages. And I would go on to other things, but if that will come to a reapplication, so I'll stop at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Had this application been for not for self-build, the answer would be, in my view, would be no, because it's outside the built-up area boundary. The criticism has been made of the design, particularly that it's in the shape of a cul-de-sac. Well, according to my map, across the road, across the main road, is another cul-de-sac. Argument has been made that the site is separate from the rest of the village, yet there are numerous houses up and down that road on the same side of the road. There's no objection from the Highways Authority, who have the data. Is the number 10 that critical? If it was written down as a definite limit, it would be. But as we've been told, it's a matter of planning judgment. Case officer has produced evidence or references to other decisions made by this authority where 12 and 13 have not been accepted to be, have been accepted to be small. They're not oversized. So it's the question of sewage and sewage systems. It seems to me condition 22 provides an adequate answer to addressing the problems that could arise. I'm fine. My mindset is, if the answer is no, how likely is an inspector to support that as a no? And I think the officer's made enough arguments, uncomfortable though I am in some respects, to say that an appeal would succeed. It's finely balanced. I accept it's finely balanced. I feel some sympathy towards the developer, because coming forward with a plan of 20, he's then effectively told that's too many, and he reduces that to 16 and then down to 13, and then he's told, well, or the criticism is, well, the plots are too large, there's too much space here, the whole thing is too big, when the numbers are down to 13. 13 in Napton, based on 450, is less than 3%. The increase over the CS 15, 16 sizes is not, I mean, there are plenty of villages have had houses which are well above those limits. So on balance and on fear of the wrath of an inspector, and given the recommendation, I would, only on the basis it's self-build, which I accept, and that we aren't in the position where we know our numbers and are certain, and despite the improvement over the last 18 months or so, there's a rolling need for self-builds, and it does apply not to just Napton, but to the district demand. I'm inclined to err on the side of grant. So if we deal with the refusal first, I shall oppose that.
Well, thank you, Councillor Harvey. And I think at this point I should just make some of my own thoughts clear, because I empathise with quite a bit of what you've just articulated. I think that we have got district-wide demand to provide these types of plots. It's not just a local demand, and we know that there's a rolling need. In my mind, this argument about small or not small really hinges on the scale of this service village, which we've heard is around 450 homes. It's quite significant. There are some public benefits coming by way of an improvement in the road, but I do understand the concerns about the kind of layout and design on this particular side of Southern Road. That said, I heard also from the applicant about the work that they've done with the community, starting off with 20 for the site and reduced and ended up with 13. And I'm just wondering in my own mind as to whether or not we're getting really hung up over this definition of small scale. I know it's in the neighbourhood development plan, we need to give full weight to that. My personal feeling at the moment is I'm finding it quite difficult, but balancing the need for this self and custom built housing, which we don't have a specific policy against the harm on the landscape and the issue as to whether or not it's small or otherwise in the NDP. I'm leaning towards Councillor Harvey's argument on this. That's my personal view. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. Just in response, I do appreciate where Councillor Harvey's coming with that. I think, and I am alive to the fact that we do have to maintain a stock of self and custom builds, but we are in a position where we can be more discerning, and the utilising neighbourhood development plans is incumbent on us to do that, because I think we need to be able to empower our communities to feel that they are taking charge of the development that's happening in their area, and that's what's been produced by Napton, with support from the whole community. And I mean, I made the point that I did say in my sort of first contribution that I do think it's a bit of a catch-22. I sympathise with the developer on that. Personally, I'm not trying to give them ideas, but I think they're overusing the patch of land. I think cut the land in half and use the bit on Southern Road, and it might be more something that I could accept. The bit towards the canal is the bit that I feel starts to eke away from what I would find as acceptable development with relation to the village and the scale. It's a large site, regardless of how they populate it, and I'm certainly not happy with it being accessed from outside of the village. The cul-de-sac across Southern Road is accessed from within the village. This, you have to go around the corner out of the village along what is effectively becoming farm track to get into this site. I'm not suggesting that they should access the site from Southern Road, that would be worse, but that's part of the character aspect that I'm not happy with as well. It's not just about scale for me, it's also how it's characterised within the landscape and within the village setting, and that's what I think is unacceptable, and that's part of the way in which I maintain my objection to it.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Who would like to speak? I've got two over here. I'll go for Councillor Harding, please.
Thank you. I do know Napton. I lived there for 14 years up until 2002. I lived on the south side of the hill, the more fashionable side, with glorious views over the Oxford Canal, the village plague pit, and the sewage works. And I can tell you that even when I lived there, the sewage works were struggling. You could hear the engines really struggling. It was like having an HGV outside your window sometimes. So I am concerned about the sewage side of things, but we do have a Plan B, which is covered by condition 22. I've never seen so many conditions on a planning application. This is incredible. But going through this list of objections here, I'm struggling to find reasons to refuse it that we could defend at appeal. Accidents, yeah, one or two slight injuries, that's not excessive. I know that sounds a bit callous, but in comparison with other areas, we're looking, I checked the flows before I came, we're looking at about 6,000 vehicles a day on the A425. For some idea of scale, Birmingham Road is carrying about 20,000 a day now. So again, that's not excessive. If we were modelling this site, you'd be assuming around about 1.5 vehicle movements in the morning peak hour maximum. When we modelled Bishopton 500, we were looking at 376 extra vehicles going northbound alone. So, you know, it's round about one movement per house, usually. So that's not terribly excessive. So I really don't think the road safety concerns stack up. But I can see the point about, I mean, it's a big site, the plots are huge, the village is crying out for bungalows. The developer says self-build, they could build bungalows if they want there. So that's up to them. But bungalows are usually occupied by people older than me, and who's going to self-build a bungalow if they're older than me? They're going to be old as Methuselah. But having said that, I really don't think we could defend this at appeal if we turned it down. And we're just going to overload our planning department again with more appeals.
Okay.
So I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Harvey, and I do apologise.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. Councillor Passingham, you're next.
I'm tending to agree with Councillor Harvey as well. There doesn't seem to be any definite planning reasons that could be upheld if it went to appeal. But there are also some quite good things about the application in that I like the idea that it's genuine self-build. I like the idea of the big public open space with the retention pond, which is good for wildlife, and it'll be an added amenity for the village. The fact that the entrance to the cul-de-sac is off the Stockton Road surely is safer than the entrance being off the main road. So there are some quite good things about it, but yeah, it's there are no good enough planning reasons to turn it down. I don't.
Thank you, Councillor Passingham. Would anyone else like to contribute? If not, I understand that we have a proposal, and that is from Councillor Adam, seconded by Councillor Parry, and that is a proposal to go against the recommendation of the officers and to refuse this application, principally for reasons of the NDP, the scale, and some landscape characteristics and access. So I think we should move this to a vote. Yeah, the precise wording for the reason for refusal, if the vote goes in favour of a refusal, will be delegated to the planning manager. So there we have it. We have a proposal to refuse this against the recommendation of the officers. So all those in favour of that proposal, please raise their cards.
6, Chair.
And all those against that proposal?
4, Chair. Okay,
in which case that's carried, and the application 230218 outline, land south of Stockton Road, Napton on the Hill, has been refused, with the reasons for refusal being delegated to the planning manager. Thank you all for your contributions to that debate and that general discussion on that application. Just take a short break, I think, at this point. Thank you.
character of this road. The materials changing to the cladding and the render can also be noted it's in positions within the street scene. So it is felt that the street scene is characterised by these flush ridge heights, uniform terrace properties. So the recommendation is to grant the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Right, we have a registered speaker on this application, and that is Town and District Councillor Fradgley. Good evening, Councillor Fradgley. Sorry, it's taken a little while. That first application was lengthy. But you have 3 minutes to speak on this. I think you'll know the form. Do you think you'd like a 30-second warning? Shall I throw something at you with 30 seconds to go? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, when you're ready, off you go.
Yes. There has been a very long-standing design principle that extensions to dwellings must be subordinate to the host dwelling and that a lack of subservience in design be resisted. The approved extensions show an extension which is subordinate to the main house. The current application seeks to remove that important design element without justification. Whilst historically there may be examples in the town where non-subservient extensions have been granted, two wrongs don't make a right, and we need to be mindful of the future applications making same precedent arguments, including this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Caught me out there. That was only 48 seconds. Do you want to say anything else? Members? Perfect. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor Fradgley, please? No, it looks like you're getting off scot-free. Thank you, Councillor Fradgley, for your input. Appreciate that. Okay, so now we can, that's the only speaker, so we can move on to points of clarification from the officer. Anybody like to ask? Councillor Adam, please.
Thank you. Yeah, looking at the house opposite, which clearly is the justification for the sort of change of design form on this one, could you just elaborate on how that got through, as it were, to justify? I mean, essentially, would not the same objection stand for that one in terms of subservience?
I think the important thing to remember is there's no hard and fast rule that every extension should have a step down. In most cases, they probably ought to, particularly on semi-detached houses and detached houses. But there's certainly a strong argument on terraces that if you step it down at the end of a terrace, it can actually draw too much attention to it. My judgment on what you've seen is that the character of the area is made up of terraces that have been extended at the same ridge height, and that actually has a more pleasing design effect. And that's why officers recommended that it's acceptable to have a continuous ridge. It won't always be acceptable, but we feel it would be in this case.
Thank you. Any further points of clarification from the officer? Councillor Harvey.
Just as a matter of fact, when the application, the report mentions the extension will now increase marginally in height, what is marginally in this instance? Is it a matter of a few inches?
.2 metres.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to ask a question? So I don't think I've got anything to add. I think you made it clear that if you could whiz round on the street scene, please. You made it clear that in fact we're looking at a terrace of a consistent ridge height across all, and on the other side of the road it's the same. Would that be correct?
Yep, so the other side of the road is all consistent ridge height as well.
Okay, thank you. So further questions? No, in which case we can move to the debate and discussion. Councillor Edden.
I am here, really. I think the officers pointed out and clarified regarding the continuation of the roof line being already present, and that subservient sometimes being more displeasing on the eye. For me, it's far less incongruous, the newer proposal, so I'm happy to propose we go in line with officers' recommendations.
Okay, so I have a proposal from Councillor Edden to accept the officer's recommendations to accept this, to grant. Anybody else like to speak? Yeah, Councillor Harvey.
Second, please.
Councillor Harvey seconding. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. I was going to first propose, then second, but I've been beat on both points. I'd just like to appreciate the fact that the point of principle was observed by the council, the town council, in objecting to this, but the argument that I've heard from the planning officers has suitably swayed me that it's not a concern to go against that point of principle in this time. So I'll be supporting the proposal.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, in which case we have a proposal and a seconder for this application 2402-178 to go in line with the officer's recommendation to grant. And we'll move to a vote on that. So all those in favour, your cards,
That's
please.
unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And those against? Thank you. None. Well, thank you, members, for your contributions. So the outcome of that is that application 2402-178, Vary at 16 Sanctus Drive, Stratford-on-Avon, is granted in accordance with the other conditions attached. With the 3 conditions attached. Thank you. Thank you. Committee. No, I don't think so. What I wanted to make clear was that Councillor Fradgley was objecting as a town councillor, not as a district councillor. Thank you. So just returning to the agenda, item 8, any urgent business?
No, Chair.
Thank you very much, in which case I shall declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your contributions this evening. It's been quite a tough one